Hello and welcome to the Leader Generation podcast brought to you by ModOp. I am Aaron Grando, VP of Creative Innovation here at ModOp, and today I am joined by two great guests. Fabio Fiss from Miami. He's on our DX team. He leads the DX team from a technology standpoint. And Joe DiGiovanna from our innovation team, VP of Technology on the innovation team. I work really closely with both Fabio and Joe working on stuff for the innovation team. And I'm really excited to talk to them today about vibe coding. It seems like you can't really go anywhere online these days without tripping over somebody talking about vibe coding. So I'm excited to hop into the topic with both of these guys who I know have some real world experience getting into it. But before we hop into that, I did want to just like set the stage. What is vibe coding and where does it come from? And where the term originates, I'll start there. There was a viral tweet, as many things these days start out with, back in February, which feels like a lifetime ago, honestly, from Andre Karpathy, who was an OpenAI founder. He was like an AI leader at Tesla for a while, all around very smart AI guy. And he said in a tweet, there's a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that code even exists. And he goes on, I asked for the dumbest things like decrease the padding on the sidebar by half because I'm too lazy to go find it. I accept all always. I don't read the diffs anymore. And when I get error messages, I just copy and paste them in with no comment. Usually that fixes it. So, that's obviously a very, very permissive definition of vibe coding. And I think honestly, the definition has changed a bit in the time since he posted that tweet. So I'll start with Joe. What does vibe coding mean to you?
I'm not that laid back about vibe coding, but for the most part, I do agree. It definitely lets you have a different experience when you're in there. I feel like it lets you, focus on areas like rapid prototyping and areas where you don't have a ton of deep expertise. It lets you skip repetitive boilerplate tasks and focus more on design and the critical components. Actually, one of the more interesting things that we've been able to see over the past few years is how much the iterations of models have improved the quality of the output we're seeing. And I feel like that for me has expanded its use cases a fair amount.
Yeah, I especially felt that the change from the older generation of the Claude models to the newest Claude model, Sonnet 3.7, was a huge jump in my vibe coding toolkit. And speaking of that toolkit, what we're talking about here is coding using like AI assisted IDEs. So stuff like Cursor and apps that have been deployed over the course of the past year, especially like V0 from Versal, Lovable, Bolt, Claude Code is another kind of application. But basically, all of these do what they do is they read your code base and they wrap their context windows around what you're working on, and then you can prompt them and it generates the code for you. And from that point, each kind of has their own ins and out of how their interface works. But the general pattern is it suggests some edits to code that you're working in actual working files, and then you can accept or reject those changes. You can do the QA yourself. You can kind of just like let it go and do a whole bunch of changes. You can ask for small changes. It's a new kind of strategy that we're thinking about and how we make it work as you're directing the AI to do these tasks. And Fabio, in some off-screen conversations that we had before this call, you kind of described it as conducting an orchestra. Can you elaborate there?
Yeah, so I think the way that I see it is that you're using these chat-enabled tools. You can do some of that on ChatGPT directly or even Gemini and other models directly. You don't even need necessarily just the IDEs, right? Or the code editors. But where I see it is that the developer or even now other people, they're not just developers or coders, they can actually just conduct the direction of where the code should go. And then the AI is building or creating that code for you. So we're moving on from a scenario where a developer might be writing every single line of code to a conductor giving the direction, the rhythm, the structures, and then the AI just creating some of that code for you or all of it. To Joe's point, I think it really enables things that we haven't seen before, especially for prototyping and just a starter of that code generation. So it's really powerful and it's empowering more people, I think, to do code that they couldn't do before.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most exciting things to me. Like, as leaders on technology teams and digital shops, seeing the way that this is potentially transforming our capabilities and our deliverables is really, really interesting. From my perspective, the speed to market equation is the first thing that comes to mind. I have an idea, taking it from an initial prototype to an actual functional prototype is faster than it's ever been before. And in a low stakes application like a prototype, it does a really, really good serviceable job when you're not worrying about, all of the super in-depth security, all the external connections. Um, when we're working in like that kind of workflow, what are some of those limitations? Because I think it's tempting to think that, wow, we can code anything now with the click of a button or the wording of a sentence into a prompt. But there are some real limitations. Joe, do you want to speak maybe to like some of the limitations that we've found as we've been experimenting with coding applications?
Sure. So I think for me, the thing that I've found it having the most issues in is when you get to a really domain specific context or like nuanced business logic or anything like that, or anywhere that like a detailed architectural understanding is needed. So some of our projects where, especially when we get like the learning management system stuff, where you get larger scale applications, I've seen it struggle with that. And so for instance, some of the developers I've been working with on there have come to me with questions about generated code in some cases, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And that, is for me one example of one of the limitations there. The other limitation I've seen is just lack of clarity for junior developers, especially when it becomes is like about debugging or maintenance. So they can kind of let it get a little out of hand if they're not careful.
Yeah, I think the question of junior developers, I do want to come back to a little bit later. So let's put that one in our back pocket. But I do want to dive a little bit deeper on the developer experience of actually using these tools because, it's not just the developer experience. To Fabio's point, we have folks that are outside of, traditional engineering backgrounds starting to pick up these coding tools. And what makes it, is it still coding if you are really just prompting the assistant? What's your take on that, Fabio?
Yeah, I think you're still coding if you know exactly what's going on, right? To Joe's point, like you have to have some initial background to understand what is doing for you to be able to then make changes and modify things through prompting. But the cool thing is that if you give into that vibe and you kind of let go, it can actually do great things for you, right? So it can be frustrating initially for a developer to not get the result that they're looking for. And one of the things that often happens is that every time that you prompt, you're going to get a different result, right? So you really have to feel comfortable with the fact that you're not fully in the control, but you can still like through small iterations, small changes, you can get to do what you want, right? So we've seen a lot of great examples with our developers where they can actually optimize a function, optimize a piece of code. They can see a context of a file that they couldn't really understand fully because it's not their main expertise. For example, if a developer is working more in the application level and they need to do some like just really quick styling for the application, they can do that styling to the point they started with just change the padding here and there, and they can make some modifications very, very quickly like that. So it does bring efficiency, but you have to understand kind of the motion of it.
And one thing I
Yeah.
want to add is one of the things I've been most impressed with is its ability to bridge knowledge gaps. So even if you don't necessarily know the language you're looking at, if you know other languages and the core concepts, its ability to go ahead and translate that for you and you still understand it adequately is impressive.
Yeah, I will say, like from my own personal experience, we picked up Cursor about mid-year last year and used it to execute on Mod Heat, which is one of our products. We've talked a little bit about it. And we built that in a framework that I was completely unfamiliar with. And I did a lot of learning through the process of working with Cursor specifically, kind of vibe coding it out. But it did allow me to kind of bring myself along the process of working through a new technology and a new stack that I was unfamiliar with, taking my, core technology fundamentals and applying them to, a slightly different domain when it comes to, the development frameworks that we had chosen to use for that project. So I think that's a huge boost that we get out of, vibe coding and these coding APIs in general. But I think it also speaks to that like element of keeping engineers in the loop as you're working on things. I have had plenty of experiences where I let it run and it goes off the rails, like way off the rails. We've all seen it. Sometimes it'll do it unintentionally if you kind of just let it go. And it can lead to some pretty fun results. But ultimately, we're here at the end of this, accepting, rejecting the changes, testing them out. Um, the other thing that I've thought is, pretty interesting when it comes to the dev experience is how it's affecting the rest of the infrastructure that we build around our devs to help them take care of projects. So, obviously there's things like Jira tickets and, the way that we break down tasks and assignments. I've started, just from a product standpoint myself, thinking about things in kind of the atomic unit terms of will this be a request that the AI is able to wrap its mind around, and starting to think about my requirements in those terms as opposed to bigger ticket items, which I think has just been an overall benefit to the way that I think about things from a clarity perspective, in addition to just helping the AI get its job done. It's helping us get a little bit more organized, which has been pretty great.
Oh, I 100%. Like there's been a number of times where I've been writing out a prompt and then I realized halfway through writing it that maybe this feature would be a little better if we did X, Y, or Z. And so, add that in there as part of the process.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of real world examples, I just mentioned us using it to ship mod heat. We shipped it pretty quickly using some coding assistance. Fabio, where are some things on the DX team that you've seen these tools really kind of fall into practice starting now? I know we're like in the process of getting adoption across the entire team right now, but where are you starting to see process and usage using these tools?
Yeah, I have many developers in our team that are always bringing these stories on a kind of weekly basis of how they were able to achieve something that they couldn't do before. So I think one area that we're seeing a lot of benefit is um, doing things in a function that you couldn't understand before, right? So you can actually optimize a piece of code without knowing too much about it. We're also getting cases where you can refactor something completely in a way that it wouldn't work before. Now it does work, right? So we've had cases where we had old stacks, for example, of our server, and we had to modernize a piece of code to make it work with a more modern stack. So a developer doesn't have to fully understand all the intricacies of that language or of the plugin in case that we're trying to use to make it work, so they can actually modernize it without knowing everything that's going on under the hood there. I think there are examples that are very good with documentation of our code, which is something that most developers always struggle with, where they know what they're doing, but they struggle with documenting what they are doing for other developers to catch the change later, right? So I think that's an area where we're enhancing our capabilities in just regular code documentation and documentation outside of our code practice as well, right? We're enhancing our documentation through these AI tools. And finally, I think one other area that I see a lot of benefit is to do more of the styling changes that I mentioned before, because not just for websites, but we're seeing also people trying things for email newsletters to automate process, things that, you just need some basic HTML or CSS. Um, and, the task can be pretty tedious to do if you're doing it manually. If you just go and use these tools to automate it, it makes it way more efficient and fast to achieve.
So Fabio, working with the DX team, you've seen these tools used for projects that are kind of up and down the scale of projects that are worked on a dev team, everything from legacy projects into, newer prototype sorts of work. How are you seeing members of the team take these tools and take advantage of having them?
Yeah, so there are a few examples. I have stories of developers coming up to me with new practices every week and things that they've been discovering. So some areas that I can tell you that it's been really useful is to create those prototypes, like we've mentioned a couple times, start just these baseline projects with different languages, right? That's one of the best capabilities is that you just tell what language you want to start, either React or PHP or whichever language you're working on, and it can just start that project for you. Um, the other area that I see a lot of benefit is in bug fixing. So we get a lot of code optimization across the board. We've had examples even where developers drop an entire zip file and they can ask through the IDE or directly on chat to just run through the code and find maybe problems or issues that can be resolved. And the tool is very capable in finding and just highlighting those things for developers. And then lastly, I think one area that we've seen a lot of benefit is in the styling side, especially for developers that are taking care of that code for more the backend side of things or the CMS, the content management system. So they sometimes can be much more efficient and faster with just doing high level styling or just changing things really quickly by prompting and making those changes go through. So there's many other examples that I could go over, but those are just some of the few highlights.
That speaks to, I think, the real variability in where all of these can be applied. And, one of the things that I have found personally as I'm using it for stuff even outside of like code context. I'm using it to take notes and to iterate on my notes, to plan projects, writing PRDs, stuff like that. So I'm always excited to hear when somebody's like found a new use for some of these tools. Joe, thinking back to when we were working on Mod Heat, what were some of the things that stuck out to you then when we picked up these tools and we started using them, and how were some ways that you were taking advantage of it then? And maybe, how have you evolved your process over the course of the past few months as these tools and your skills using them have changed?
Yeah, so on Mod Heat in particular, when I was first starting that application, it'd been quite a while, like probably 3 or 4 years since I've really touched TypeScript. So being able to jump back into that more quickly was really useful, a great time saver, and got me up to date on ES6 and everything. As far as like initiating the application, though, the big things for me were the entity schemas and the CRUD API. So all that core stuff, that you got to get out of the way. That was a huge time saver there. On the authentication front, all the core stuff like login authentication and sessions, that kind of stuff, it all helped out with tremendously. And then, like you mentioned before, the debugging portion was definitely accelerated because it was able to do a deeper analysis on that. And really, it wasn't able to get everything, but it was able to push me in the right direction to be able to solve it in a lot of cases.
You mentioned the notes. We have seen a lot of usage for documentation as well, both documentation in the code level plus documentation outside through chat tools that we can enhance. It's a hard part for a developer to make sure that they're always documenting their code, but these tools really help in that level.
Yeah. I think it definitely speaks to sometimes our time, we think about our time valued in the number of hours we spend on things, and it leads to us thinking a little bit about how that might be changing, how the value equation of time spent on something is maybe not entirely lined up with the level of effort now, or the level of expertise that does need to go into a solution. Because there are instances where these tools maybe go down the wrong road. Maybe in some cases, you can find yourself iterating endlessly on loops that don't work. So it's not one to one. I think it's probably tempting for folks that may be listening to think that this is a silver bullet type of solution, but uh, the three engineers on this call are here to assure you that it is not a silver bullet. Um, But yeah, I think that the overall outcome and the change in the way that these tools have worked over the course of the past 6 months is pointing more towards quality generations on the first iteration. But by virtue of the way that these systems are built, that's never going to be a guarantee. And having somebody in the loop, really steering it, and particularly if they have some background and knowledge about the task at hand, to Joe's point earlier, domain knowledge especially, that is the most valuable, skill set that I think that a dev can bring to a project these days. As senior technical folks, what do we really think the implications for engineering roles at companies are? Like, how does the engineering career path shift when we're moving from, domain expert in code to potentially domain expert in the domain that you work inside of? So obviously, we all work for a marketing company, and through osmosis, we have picked up a lot of marketing know-how. Is that going to be something that engineers need to focus on more moving forward? I'll give that one to Fabio.
Yeah, so I think um, in one way it will open up more capabilities for people, right? So not just developers, but other people. I think for developers that are just starting out, they really should understand what the tools are capable of so they can enhance their process, right? Because there won't be a scenario in the future where you're not assisted by those technologies. So it's really thinking about that you have as a developer an assistant driving with you. That's I think where Microsoft got the word co-pilot, right? You're still the pilot, but there's always going to be this assistant next to you. And learning to work with that assistant, I think, is really important as we move into the future for a developer, right? For senior developers, I think in a way these tools elevate them even higher in capabilities because you can take something that you already know and go even further with your knowledge, right? So you're not going to remove that expertise. There's no way to remove that experience that was built up both on the marketing side and the technical side, but you're enhancing your capabilities. You're building on top of your knowledge, and these tools will make you even more uh, capable in a sense, right? So that's where I see where things are going for developers. You're always going to need that expertise. It's just how the developer is driving the tools and how they are conducting that orchestra that I mentioned before.
Yeah, that engineering mindset is, in my opinion, super portable. Like breaking down a problem into the constituent parts, understanding the ins and outs of a system. You could take that know-how and maybe the know-how of how to set up an AI system that a lot of our engineers are starting to get good at, and apply that to lots of other roles. And maybe we'll start to see more of that moving forward as engineering teams kind of evolve, and the skills that are required and maybe haven't been traditionally kept within engineering kind of diffuse out. We welcome new expertises into the technology mix. Back to one topic from earlier, we were thinking about helping out our juniors. I think that is a really big question. How do we make sure that we are taking care of the new generation of folks that are coming up under us for a long time as developers, as engineers? There was, the kind of natural hand-holding of, engineering leads, engineering managers, reviewing code, reviewing commits, reviewing work that is done and offering suggestion, and juniors kind of over time learning how to make things work well. How does that happen when maybe a dev team shrinks because the capabilities of a single senior, you know, greatly increases, or a junior is able to just work with an AI co-pilot that is more skilled than they might be and is helping them ship really great work? How do they learn what is good? You have any thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's honestly a really difficult question and one that just market wide, everybody's still kind of figuring out. I think when it comes to helping them out, at least when I think about our people internally, reviewing their commits, helping them refactor, helping them understand what they wrote. And more importantly than any of those, helping them debug when they run into issues and understanding how to debug. I think that adds a lot of value to what they're doing. I do think there's definitely going to be some issues with them running into like a co-pilot that knows more than they do, because at that point it becomes a struggle for them to actually acquire that knowledge. Yeah, and that part of what we're doing here is we are preventing them from using certain tools until they've achieved a certain amount. So at least it gives them some level of background there,
Yeah, some small context there. Through ModOp's intranet of AI tools that we have set up, we have a training course that allows folks to get a kind of baseline set of fundamentals on using AI and accept our responsible use policy, which also includes training materials about ethics, about the way that this technology can and should be used to make sure that we're using it right by ourselves and right by our clients. We make everyone go through that set of trainings before they can even access the tool sets that we've built internally. And that's one part of it. Part of this equation is upskilling folks on those AI tool sets and those AI skills. But also, I think one thing that we're trying to do is take a look at each individual role on the team and see how their tools are integrating AI and try to put together content, training, resources for them to apply the new AI way of doing things to some of our older tools. So we have courses coming for Cursor and things like that, but I think there's also courses for some of our more design focused tools and other like AI art and content generation tools that really emphasize the way that we should do things and put it in terms of the tools that they're used to using. Well, guys, I think let's try and wrap this up. I do want to wrap it up on like a little bit of a higher note than worrying about the juniors. We love the juniors. We're definitely going to try and take care of them. But let's think of the next few years. What are we, genuinely excited about this transition from, having code be our primary instrument as we are affecting our digital world to maybe making plain old English our primary instrument and affecting the world, and the kind of doors that that opens up to other people, bringing their skill sets in and joining the fray as engineers. Fabio?
Yes, I think what I'm excited for with a lot of these shifts in technology is just the process of making these tools more available and as a part of that process, democratizing access, right? So I do see coming up in the very near future, I do see more people than just developers, like I said, um, taking advantage of these tools, right? So I'm expecting the founder of a startup to be able to prototype with a tool like this, right? I'm expecting the CEO to be able to create a small application so they can show what they want to do for a development team to execute and a project manager and that sort of thing, right? So, and I can see designers and other types of team members taking advantage of these tools, right? We are seeing more recently even Figma proposing some new functionality now and rolling out some new features that are gonna, make the connection between the visual design with the code side. It's very nascent, right? So it's still gonna develop over time, but that's where I see it. I see more people have access to these tools. I feel like, AI in that level of what we're talking about for code is just another tool of expression in a sense, right? It's the same kind of wave that happened over the ages with technology, with desktop publishing, to the web, to mobile, to social media, and now we have a new wave of expression. And I think more people are going to take advantage of it and create things that we haven't seen before. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, Joe, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to say when Fabio was saying that, it reminds me of the calculator, it's a big shift. But the two things that came to mind most for me, so right now it's allowing me to spend a lot more time on solving interesting problems as opposed to like mundane tasks. And something I think is only going to get better and better over the coming years. And then reducing barriers to experimenting with new ideas or new technologies. So it's already kind of opened that up for me. And I know as it gets better and better, it's going to open that up for more people.
Yeah, and not to introduce a brand new concept right here at the end, but we had a fun new buzzword on the innovation team start getting tossed around over the course of the past week, which is a prototype. So we've been needing a little bit of space carved out for pre-prototype ideas that are, either designed or vibe coded up before we even validate that things are looking good. But right to that point, yeah, the more micro those like pre-visualizations of ideas can get in terms of level of effort to get to something that really shows what's inside of our heads. That's really exciting. And I think I'll cap it off with an excitement about how these AI tools are, I think, interesting, separate from other AI tools because they really accelerate more development, which is kind of an exponential function. So you have AI accelerating AI, and internally here at ModOp, it's meant that we've been able to take a lot of big ideas that we have and turn them into real things for our folks to start to use, real things for clients to start to implement in their digital products, their digital experiences. Hopefully, it leads to some very interesting work that, as I sometimes want to say, creates novel creative experiences that wouldn't be able to be done before using, fuzzy logic and things that don't necessarily need to sort themselves into super specific boxes. So I'm still really looking forward to that, and just that all of this is coming faster and more exciting than I ever really expected it to be. So yeah, I think I would love to just thank Fabio and Joe for joining today. We will be back again, I'm sure, in another few days with another episode. This has been our vibe coding discussion. So thanks, guys. If you are looking for more resources on AI, we have an entire AI section on the ModOp website dedicated to it. Come check it out. Give us a call, drop your name and your info in the form that's on that page, and come work with us on the innovation team. We're doing some really, really cool work, trying to push forward our both creative and performance marketing efforts. So thank you guys, and we will talk again sometime later soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.